So today's presentation is kind of a culmination of our earlier presentations on Medicaid eligibility, home care applications, the new independent assessor process, the various assessments that have to take place before services get turned on. And it kind of turns us back a page to when managed long-term care was first enacted. Medicaid redesign team, a little history. Medicaid redesign team 1, which brought us the MLTC world. And the MLTC world had inherent in it a number of new delays because counties could no longer go out and do this on their own time. It had to run through the various processes. And you're looking at months before Medicaid could be enacted. Then we had the independent assessor process, which happened to coincide with something called COVID. So you had a whole series of new challenges and delays in bringing home health care services through Medicaid into the home and actually turning on the spigot for payment. It's one thing to apply and get a financial approval. It's a whole other thing to have services actually paid for in the home. So today we're going to walk through a process that was enacted actually as a result of the first managed long-term care implementation, and that is called immediate needs. And so this is our firm. These are our lawyers. We have 16 attorneys, 10 of whom reside here in Albany with Frank and I, 6 who are in our Manhattan office. And as most of you know, we cover a number of jurisdictions, most of New York State, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Florida. So these are the topics that you may have joined us for in the initial sessions. And today it's immediate needs because you know what? People's needs are immediate. If someone gets discharged from the hospital and they want to discharge home, how do you get services in place if they can't afford to private pay that Medicaid is going to be able to come in and put someone in place and have home health care available to that individual on a timely basis? And delay is denial in many cases, because if they can't discharge home safely with adequate help under Medicaid, what's the other choice?
Yeah,
they're going to be institutionalized. So immediate needs, I'll talk a little bit about the history as we go through the program, but I want Frank to start getting into some of the details, starting with where we have to be to get eligible for Medicaid.
So it's a Medicaid Monday, which means we're going to recap our numbers real fast. So again, good news, right? These numbers are up from last year. So if you're a single individual, for income purposes, you get $1,697 a month of your monthly income, up from $954 last year, so up over $743. If you're a couple at home, you get $2,288 combined between the two of you. Again, it's a $900 plus increase from last year. And then we have our asset limits. Again, last year it was a much smaller number. So up this year we're up to $30,182, which is up almost 14,000 or 13,000 and change from last year. And then again, if you have a couple at home, your asset limits is just shy of 41,000, up to 40,821.
And if you work with clients in other states, as I mentioned, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, Florida, the asset limit in all of those states is $2,000. So 30,000 is a lot more than 2, Frank, last I looked.
Yeah, and that's to say 16,800, which is what it was last year, was significantly more than 2. But we've seen such a large increase, comparatively speaking, that while again it's not a lot of money, it's usually comparatively speaking much more to be here than in another state doing this. So this is just kind of focusing on what an MLTC timeline would look like. So if you're just applying for Medicaid, there's not an immediate need for care, and you're just going to go through all of your regular channels. This is kind of what the process looks like. You have to be financially eligible. So usually there's some time involved with just getting eligible. That could involve setting up a trust or setting up a pooled trust, other things like that. But once you're eligible, then you're going to do that complete Medicaid application to your local county Department of Social Service or your HRA office down in New York City. There's 45 days needed to complete such an application if you don't have a pooled trust. If you need a pooled trust, that automatically jumps to 90 days because they have to have some adequate time to do a disability determination.
Maybe the chart.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. So you file your application with your local office. Then you have that Medicaid approval. So in the timeline here, we went for the lower portion for that 45-day limit. But again, if you're using a pooled trust, that automatically bumps up another 45 days. Once you're approved, then you have to contact the New York Independent Assessor's Office. You have to get scheduled for your community health assessment and your clinical appointment. So that's when you see your independent nurse, your independent doctor. Again, we covered that all in our second Medicaid Monday. So you have specific questions about that, you can go back and rewatch that. Then you actually have to go and see that doctor and see those medical professionals. So that's going to take approximately 14 days. So again, we built in 14 days to the timeline. If you're then approved, which again, most people would be approved, but if you're approved, then you have to contact your MLTC plan and start the enrollment process with that. You have to get in, and you also have to get scheduled for their assessment because they're going to come in, they're going to assess you, determine number of hours, just like the old process did before NIA. They're going to come out, they're going to conduct their assessment. They have 30 days approximately to do with that. So again, push that out another 30 days. And then once all that is done and approved through all your assessments, then you're going to actually do that MLTC enrollment. So if you follow the timeline, we started September 1st, we're on December 1st for our MLTC enrollment, but you always have to be mindful of where you are in the month, because if you enroll with the MLTC plan towards the middle of the month, you might roll into the next month because you have to be enrolled by the 19th of the previous month to get services for the following first. That is a mouthful and I'm sorry, but that's another way that this process just bogs down. And then once you're approved and you're in the plan, then your MLTC plan contracts with your providers, and then the care starts. So if everything goes swimmingly, 100%, no delays, no issues, this is a 4-month process. Most of the time we're seeing this is going to take longer because you've got either your pooled trust, your NIA assessments can't happen, your MLTC assessments can't happen, anything else that could happen along the way. Maybe there's an unexpected medical event, hospitalization. So that's why in the previous slide we had said that in general, this process is a 4.5 to 6 month process for most people, because this is all the moving pieces that have to align to get all this to work.
And if you were to create a system to provide essential services to individuals who are aging at home, who want to be at home in the lowest cost setting, would you ever, in your wildest dreams, conceive of this system? It's something that, if you think about it, Frank, who benefits? Who pays while this delay is occurring?
The consumer.
Who doesn't pay?
The government.
The state.
Medicaid's not on the hook to pay for you while this is all going on, and they don't really reimburse you while all this is going on either. So you're just going to continue to pay your money and provide for yourself as best as you can. And if you can't, then you have a new problem.
So if you follow the state budget process and you look at the original Medicaid redesign team, which I won't go into here, but buy me a drink sometime, I'll tell you the real story. Or the Medicaid redesign team 2, what their charge was in the initial one was to cut $6 billion out of the Medicaid budget. The second one was to cut $2.5 billion out of the Medicaid budget. Nursing homes are pretty fixed. All they can do is capitate rates, but they have a certain number of beds. But home care, they can delay eligibility and save the state money and curtail the budget. And putting managed long-term care companies as fiscal intermediaries was step 1. Putting NIA in place to delay the process and not allow counties to do these determinations any longer was the second step in the process. We don't know what the third step's going to be, but New York State projects a $9 billion budget deficit for next year. So we'll be watching. Part of the elder law section responsibilities that we've had over the years is to go up the hill and lobby with the elder law section for the benefit of people with disabilities and aging people who want to stay at home. This chart was part of our lobbying effort. And it was done at the time, I believe, by David Goldfarb, Valerie Bogart, a series of my colleagues. We went up the hill and met with the chairs of the Health Committee and the Aging Committee and said, you just put a system in place that took a 1-month application process and made it 4. Who's going to take care of people for those 4 months? And they had no idea, of course. So they said, can you explain it better? And we went back the next time with this chart. And they looked at it and they said, oh, my goodness. And as a result of that and other lobbying efforts by advocacy groups, and this is lobbying, folks, you have to advocate, they enacted the Immediate Needs Program to address the situation of people who could not wait those 4 to 6 months.
So this is I think it's unfortunately still a relatively unknown program, or at least ability to where you have that if you need help and you need it fast, you can actually apply for what's called immediate needs assistance, and you get help a lot faster. So the Medicaid application has to be approved within 7 days. It has to be processed within 7 days, and then services approved within 12, right? Everything that you see on the slide. So that's a significant increase in time of getting the help to that consumer than from what that chart was just showing, which is again 4 months if everything goes well. And again, that typically isn't just how that typically goes.
And if you're out there watching and you're someone from the Department of Social Services of a local county or the Office for Aging, you want to do the right thing. And what was happening is anytime that the counties had a chance to do the right thing, they did it. And so the state started taking away their opportunity and ability to do the right thing and handing it off to these third parties, one of which is called the Managed Long-Term Care Company, one of which is called NIA. So as that happened and they put it out to third-party contractors, they have shielded themselves somewhat from liability. And I don't mean to make a political speech, but that's the reality of where we are.
So we thought it would be good to pass along the things that you can include with such an application if you want to make one for immediate needs. So first thing would be a cover sheet, or there actually is a transmittal form in New York City. So you actually want to put it right up front that this is immediate needs, because whenever that county office receives that paperwork, we want to make sure it's getting routed appropriately within that office. You want to put in a complete Medicaid application as you can. Right, that's one of the reasons why clients like working with people like us. We do so many applications. We typically know what's going to suffice for documenting your income, documenting your assets, documenting your residency, things like that. But if you're working with somebody in the field, you want to make sure just as much as you can put together, you want to put together right away, because if they have everything, it's much faster that they can put that actual approval through. There's a practitioner statement of need for personal care or consumer-directed personal assistance services. There's a new form. We're going to talk about that a little bit. You're going to have also an attestation new form, the 5786 form. That's going to have its next slide, I think, coming up after this one.
Okay.
And then there's a HIPAA release, and then obviously a detailed cover letter, just again, kind of saying why this is an immediate needs case. Again, just trying to give as much information as possible to that caseworker, showing that this is immediate needs and this is why we're asking for it.
So once you meet the threshold of proving Medicaid eligibility from an asset perspective, an income perspective, which may include a pooled trust, that's now the easy part of the application. If you need care right away, the immediate needs application puts a whole nother burden on the applicant. And people ask us all the time, well, can I do this by myself? This is highly technical, Frank.
Yeah.
And our firm does this start to finish, and it is a tremendous amount of work. And you need to know what the client's rights are and how these forms apply, because a lot of times things get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it's just you need one piece of paper that's missing, and then you're getting a doc request, and everything could have been wrapped up much faster. And now maybe this isn't really even an immediate needs anymore, because it's taken you a few weeks to get what you need to satisfy the application, and that's what we don't want.
So, as a practitioner, I've gone to the elder law section meetings, talked to my colleagues. And for a long time, people would just put applications in as immediate needs, even if it was a gray area. You might as well take the chance that you can get it through as immediate needs versus going through the whole MLTC process, which is going to be a much lengthier process.
That was certainly I think a common practice during COVID too, because of just the inability to have caregivers come in easily, and just anything to get through that hurdle faster was something that people were certainly considering.
So you may want to take the shot, but the attestation form is something you need to be aware of and be able to complete.
Yeah, so the reason why I made a specific slide for this was to point out that such a form exists. You should know that it does, because if you want to do immediate needs work, you have to have this form. The other noteworthy thing here is that the form number has actually changed. There's actually a new form. So the DOH 5786 is a new form. It was created in November of last year. So if you've done previous immediate needs applications, if you have some of that paperwork on file, just make sure that you're using the correct forms. I would like to hope that a county wouldn't reject something just because it wasn't on the most current form, especially this one, because the questions are essentially the same as what they were. But again, just best practice to use the current form. Whenever you're putting this in front of somebody, you're having them attest that they have no informal caregivers available that are able or willing to provide or to continue to provide care, because sometimes we have a situation where somebody has care currently, but the caregiver has to return back to work. Maybe their FMLA is running out, or summer break is over, or they've had their own medical events or something like that. So sometimes even a case that doesn't necessarily appear in its face to be immediate needs may become one in the future, because that consumer may be losing their caregiver. You also have to attest that you're not receiving help from a home health service agency. So again, this is a place like where I feel like sometimes the immediate needs request can fail, because sometimes you do have somebody who needs help, but they're paying an agency. And if the county comes in and says, well, if you're putting this application through because someone is not safe, well, if they're paying for care and there's people in the home, then clearly they're safe, and this isn't going to work. But
What
however,
about the fact that they are going to run out of money tomorrow?
and that I would say that's where our last bullet point comes in, where it's arguably you can say either they don't have the financial means to continue to pay, or sometimes they're having the home health agency in, but it's not for the total amount of the care that they need. They might have other informal caregivers, family members that are kind of filling the gaps. So again, if you're not having the agency cover the whole amount of care, typically that's more where we've seen that the requests will be approved. You also have to say that there's no adaptive or specialized equipment that are able to help suit a person's needs, which makes sense, because if you can use some other equipment or some other supplies to take the place of needing an in-person caregiver in the home, clearly that would be preferable from the state's perspective. And lastly, that you have no other third-party insurance or other benefits that could pay for these services, which if I know how, personally, if there was another way to do this, I would certainly consider maybe doing some of that in addition to doing everything here. So that's not really a concern that there's another payer source, but again, it's part of the attestation form, and you should be aware of what it says when you have someone sign it.
So this form needs to be artfully completed, because you are attesting to this, and you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're shading the truth in a direction that it's just not true anymore. But there is also room for interpretation and room to prepare yourself to file this application so that you meet the criteria. So it's something that you have to do very, very carefully, but it's a chance that when you look at the next slide, because Frank, this was designed to ameliorate the very, very harsh delays that are imposed under the current MLTC system. So what do we get if we're able to meet this burden and fill out this affirmation appropriately, accurately, but in a way that we qualify? How important can that be?
So you get that approval within 7 days, which, I mean, on generally speaking, to get an approval within 7 days is phenomenal. It's not saying it's never happened, but you can't count on that. And honestly, the county offices, while there are so many good people doing so many good things, they have their 45 or 90 time limits. So even if it's somebody where we're checking in just to see if, on the status of a case, if it's been a few weeks, a lot of times people will say, it's in the stack, we're working on it, but we're within our 45 days and we're happy to turn it back around as we get closer. And county workers are perfectly allowed to do that. That's the time that they have by law, but sometimes you just need help faster. So this gets you that approval within 7 days. And if there isn't a complete application, if you do have missing documentation, that local department is supposed to reach out to you within 4 and tell you essentially what you need to cure the problem. Now, just because they have 4 days to tell you doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get the information within a quick period of time. That's why you want to try to put in that complete application as best as you can right from the start.
And maybe it's a good time to talk about what the burden is for disclosure with a home care application, which is very different than a nursing home application.
Sure.
And when and if that may change.
Yeah, so right now you need your current income, your current assets, all of your biographical information, like birth certificates, your proof, social security cards, social security numbers. We like to include tax returns. It's basically just proving who you are financially and biologically. You only need currently your most current bank statements for a home care application. But Lou, what I think you're alluding to is if we get into next year, like we've been forecasting for quite some time now, if the look back comes into place for home care services, which again, we were forecasting to be approximately April 1st of next year, if there's a 2.5-year look back, then this complete application would then have to have 30 months of financial statements with it, again, that have hopefully been pre-audited with all the information about large transactions in and out documented with it as well. And that's going to add a ton of work to that caseworker that now has to process all of that within 7 days, or at least get a document request out within 4. So luckily, we're not in that scenario right now, but if everything goes as we believe it will next year, that's what this is going to look like. And we'll have to see how that new increased burden of production on the county will impact timelines for this.
And at the annual summer meeting of the State Bar Elder Law section, it was announced that the Department of Health has sent out smoke signals. We don't have anything formal in writing yet that I've seen, but they've sent out a signal to say that the 2.5-year look back period will be pushed into 2025. so that the April 1, 2024 date, which has already been pushed back 3 times, looks like it's going to get pushed back a 4th time. So good news, we don't have to wrestle with that 30 months of financial records for an immediate needs application for probably another year and a half or so, some point in 2025. And the Bar Association is lobbying very hard to prevent the imposition of that rule entirely, to actually repeal the 2.5-year look back period for home care services. And as we as attorneys who do these applications every day start thinking through the burden that that's going to impose on situations like this, it's untenable. There is no way that the burden could be met in a timely fashion. And so it's something that we'll see where the state goes with it. But again, with a $9 billion budget shortfall projected for next year, they're not going to be looking at giving more away. They're going to be looking at taking benefits back. And the immediate needs process has helped tremendously. Every hospital discharge planner, every nursing home discharge planner should know this like the back of their hand, so that they can get Medicaid in place and get services in place for people to get them discharged. Because right now, we work with hospitals and nursing homes locally and across the state. They're having backlogs of people in their hospital beds who don't need to be in the hospital bed. They need a discharge. And the only place they can send them is to a nursing home. And we have many nursing homes who have shut down admissions for many of their cases. So it's a problem that is just going to grow and continue. So immediate needs is one way to get the services, provided they're available in your area, and get them in place in a timely fashion.
So after approval, so after that 12 calendar days, then there's going to be some other things that happen. So essentially what has to happen is that NIA now has to get involved, because now NIA has to be involved to actually do the assessments and things like we went through on our second Medicaid Monday. So NIA is going to confirm the receipt of the case from the local Medicaid office, and the local office should be coordinating a call between either the consumer or the direct or their representative and the actual NIA office to actually start the coordination for that community health assessment and the clinical appointment. I'm not saying that that's happening. I'm just saying that's what should be happening according to the rules. Once NIA has been approved, then the local Medicaid office then comes back into the picture. They then review all the documentation that was collected from the health assessment and the clinical appointment. They're the ones that are developing the plan of care, because again, there is no MLTC enrollment at this point. So it kicks back to the local county. They put the plan of care together. We do have that second bullet from the bottom that talks about if the plan of care calls for more than 12 hours, NIA is going to get kicked it back again to go to that independent medical review. So just another step in this whole process if you have a high needs case.
And we talked about that in the other Medicaid Monday with the NIA presentation. And that was done as a safety measure to make sure that that's the guise under which it was passed, that people were safe who needed more than 12 hours a day of home health care. But if you think about utilization and who the highest cost patients are, knowing that managed long-term care is a capitated system, the MLTC gets one payment to provide all services for that individual. So if someone needs 24/7 care, that's a fiscal drain on the MLTC. And now they put in this additional review by an independent medical panel as to whether the individual is safe at home receiving home health care. And I would pose to you, safe at home versus what? Safe in a nursing home? You know, the comparison is kind of stark when you think about staffing at a 40-to-1 ratio versus a 1-to-1 ratio. But be that as it may, this is a requirement that you have to meet if you're over 12 hours in terms of care.
And then they're going to contract with that local agency or provider to actually get the care in place, whether that's a home health agency or it's going to kick it over to a fiscal intermediary to get consumer directed personal assistance involved.
So then you go back into the MLTC system.
Right, because at the end of the day, immediate needs is only temporary. Right, after 120 days, anyone who's enrolled through immediate need should be getting a notice from Maximus or New York Medicaid Choice, depends on what you want to call them, but they're all the same, saying that you have to pick a plan. So the tip here of why we wanted to include this slide was so you should know with anyone that's being enrolled with the immediate needs program, you have essentially that 120-day window to then determine which plan ultimately will best service the case once it goes away from the county and transitions to the managed long-term care company. So it would make sense to contract the local agency, whoever's providing the care, or speak with your independent providers through your consumer directed plan to see what plan they want to work with. That way, to make sure that when you enroll or when you're asked to enroll, you just can select which plan you want. Because if you don't select one, they're going to put you in a plan. And it wouldn't be unheard of where if you get put into a plan that then doesn't contract with the home health agency you're working with, and then your plan either has to get redone or you have to then disenroll and re-enroll into that new MLTC. And if the whole idea was to have this go smoothly, that's not going to go very smooth.
Yeah, this is an important issue, and it's kind of behind the scenes. Managed long-term care companies enter contracts with home health care providers. And if you choose a home health care provider that doesn't have a contract with the MLTC that you apply to, then you either have to choose a new MLTC or you have to choose a new home health care agency. And as anyone who works in home health care knows, finding the staff to staff a case is the holy grail right now. So if you are lucky enough to find an agency that can staff this case, and then you lose the agency because you applied to the wrong MLTC, that's kind of a disaster. So you need to know and do a little homework to know that the agency you're choosing can work with the MLTC that you're choosing so that you have a payment source for that agency care. We use upstate and downstate now a lot of consumer directed personal assistance. So you're going through a consumer directed, so same thing. You got to make sure that they're contracted with that particular MLTC. So managed long-term care required the imposition of these new rules for immediate needs. These are rules that you can take advantage of for your clients to make sure that they get timely response and a timely answer to their home health care needs. Still a lot of details, a lot of things that you need to do in order to qualify for immediate needs. But if you have any chance, I recommend that you take it and file that immediate needs application and take the shot. So our firm, Frank, you and the staff do a lot of work in this area, determining eligibility, working through the guidelines, preparing applications, filing applications, helping people get the care. And this is probably a good point to talk about the other team members that we try to bring in when we're doing home care applications, because lawyers can't necessarily go to the home and do an assessment of the needs of that individual or attend the NIA assessments. So if you are working in this area, one of the professions that we have found tremendously forceful in advocating for our clients is care coordinators or geriatric care managers.
Can't agree more.
And we think that in the home care world, it's an essential team to have a qualified social worker or RN consulting on the process to help get the care needed. If you need 4 to 6 months of private care, making sure that that care is being provided efficiently, supervising the care, making sure it's being done properly. Care coordinators, life care coordinators, geriatric care managers, whatever you want to call them, we think are essential to home care and the practice of elder law in home care. And without them, we'd be lost in many of these applications.
Yeah, I mean, because as Lou said, it's finding the care has become in a lot of ways the hardest part of this whole puzzle. Because even if you got that Medicaid approval within those 7-day period and all your assessments happened like we just went through in the timelines, if there's no home health agency able to staff the case or no people able to enroll with consumer directed, then getting a fast approval didn't really get any help. And at the end of the day, it's all about getting the help. And if there's no help to be had, then that person's going to be in another bad situation with no help and maybe looking at institutionalization again.
The other thing that we did a Medicaid Monday on is fair hearings and appeals. So what if you need 12 hours or 16 hours and you get 4? That's a very common response from an MLTC and from NIA. Oh, we can only give you 4 hours a day. We've had companies actually tell our clients that's all we're allowed to give. Well, that's nonsense. They can give 24 hours a day, provided you prove your case. So having a good care manager, care coordinator involved in helping to gather up medical evidence, put the medical application together, especially with immediate needs, all the affidavits and affirmations that you need, I think is tremendously powerful. And we would recommend to anyone out there working in this field to build that team appropriately, have the legal knowledge and the care coordination in one bundle for the client, make it seamless for the client. And speaking of consumer-directed personal assistance,
we're back next month. So we'll be talking about that. We'll go into detail about why it's such an important program and just some of the questions that we get asked all the time about how it works.
Yep, we hope you can join us for Medicaid Monday in October 16th at noon.